Loss is an inevitable part of life. At first, all you'll probably lose are relatively meaningless things like toys, time, and other things you eventually grow to expect from living life. However, it doesn't take long for you to lose your sense of reality, friendships you thought would stay the same forever, and sometimes lose the life of someone you know, and eventually, you'll lose someone you love. In a way, when Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric came out, I lost something. I lost hope that Sonic could live up to my expectations of him. I used to try and defend him and his games when people would fairly critique them, but I couldn't let that happen. I would fight tooth and nail to make sure no one could deny at least what Sonic could have been. After Boom, I couldn't fool myself into trying to make Sonic something he wasn't. He wasn't perfect, and sometimes you have to accept that your heroes are nothing more than people, or anthropomorphic animals in this case. While this wasn't the biggest crash Sonic had in quality, it was the straw that broke the camel's back for my blind adoration of the series. Welcome to Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, the time Sonic died again. If I continue to do reviews of games on this channel, I would often like to start with a section on the bias. Yes, despite me holding the best opinion on the internet, that doesn't necessarily mean it's factual. Everyone has biases going into a game. It could be as little as what you thought of the game's name, and it could be as large as this game I'm about to talk about. My bias is that this game broke my heart and my sanity. This was the first video game where I followed its development. I saw the early trailers and game discussions on this game, and I was very invested in it. When reviews started to come out, it was incredibly apparent that the game wasn't great. Quite frankly, it was received quite poorly. This event changed my approach to the Blue Blur. Before, I defended Sonic mercilessly because I felt in my adolescence that if something were wrong with Sonic, then he would no longer be considered as cool as I had come to know him. I even defended 06 without even playing it. I didn't claim it was good or anything like that, but I would bring up its development cycle being atrocious and its ambition as a good defense. After Boom was released, however, I found myself at a fork in the road. Would I continue loving Sonic and acknowledge his many shortcomings? Would I pretend like nothing changed and keep on defending the evident flaws of the series? Or would I give up on Sonic and say that Sonic was never good and leave him to rot? In the end, I picked the first option, thankfully, and I continue to be a Sonic fan to this day. While 06 was the nail in the coffin for the Sonic fandom and gaming community's outlook on the Blue Blur to change dramatically, Sonic Boom wasn't as impactful for the community. When Sonic 06 came out, the community was like this.
This is my boy! My boy!
When Boom came out, I saw it more as a
Ah, shit. Here we go again.
So, to make a long story short, this game did to me what 06 did to the community at large 8 years prior. I knew it was a bad game, so I've never played it until now. And I'm going into this knowing I'm going to have an interesting time overall when I tackle this beast of mediocrity. First things first are to touch on the Boom look briefly. I'll keep this short and sweet. The characters now seem to love bandages / sports tape. The main set of characters look solid in my opinion. I don't think their redesigns were abhorrent or anything like that. Assuming the designs were exclusively kept for this side series, I would be more than okay to have them coexist with the modern designs. The other characters in this game seem fitting to the rest of the world. I'm not saying they're particularly interesting, but I think they fit the part for this game, especially in comparison to other games where realistic looking humans coincide with talking animals. Overall, I don't mind the Boon design at all. It's not the most questionable thing I now have on my browser history, so that's undoubtedly a plus. Now, the game starts with Sonic getting shot and covered by boulders. So of course we know he'll be able to walk it off later. We're then brought back to the start of the game, where we see Sonic and friends giving chase to Eggman. Then, after not dying from the frame rate alone, we're thrust into a section where we learn about the combat. After that, there's an introductory movement learning section and then another fight scene. They eventually all fall back into the ruins. Apparently the robots are too threatening to take on, even though we've seen they're total pushovers. Though perhaps Sonic went into the ruins so the game wouldn't explode from having all the enemies on screen. This then leads to the introduction of 2D challenge/puzzle sections that highlight a specific team member's main ability. Tails can hover, Knuckles can climb, Sonic can spin dash, and Amy uses acrobatics as well as the ability to defy the laws of physics with her triple jump. Again, a double jump is perfectly reasonable, but a triple jump? No way. Alright, I should probably get this out of the way. This game is incredibly broken and unrefined in so many ways. The game's lack of quality is due to a myriad of reasons. I won't go over them since others have done a much more specific and better job than I could in this video. Remember, games from big franchises don't just become train wrecks because someone on the development team thought it would be funny. It occurs when things go tragically wrong with development and the game can't be delayed further. So keeping this in mind, I'll at least address how the game runs. The frame rate is often poor, the graphics glitch regularly, and the game can be broken in half easily. Knowing all of this, I will not use any game-breaking glitches and will play the game as intended. Well, probably not that the developers intended to make a bad game, but I only have the game that came out, so that's what I'm gonna play. I should also mention that I'm running the patch version of the game. I'm not doing a video just to make fun of how broken the code is, as that has already been done to death. I don't know everything about what's included in the patch, but I know it makes the game smoother in many ways. Regardless, the game's still unpolished and lacking, patch or not. Yeah, this Wii U game isn't going to get a Switch port, or any port for that matter. Our heroes then make it into a chamber where the main villain awakens because the plot needs to move along. This guy's name is Lyric, and in case you're wondering, there are no musical themes or messages in this entire game. Lyric's name is simply his name, with no clever connection to the gameplay or narrative. Heck, even a pun about his name would have done something, but no, it's just his name. He takes off, leaving them trapped in an Enerbeam rope. After Tails massages one of the links, the heroes are free to give chase to Lyric. Once that train ride is over, Sonic and his friends find themselves in the central hub world of the game. After seeing this gentleman named Cliff, he gives us a nice serving of exposition and scolds Sonic.
Not cool, Sonic.
The first part of this game's cutscenes is just everyone ragging on Sonic ad nauseum.
Cool, Sonic.
Huh. Just like real life. Cliff tells us we need the crystals to thwart Lyric's plan. We then go to the mines because that's where the game tells us to go. This game often does a common thing, direct you or force you to do something for little to no reason. If you listen to the previous cutscene, there's no mention of the mines. All you know is that you need to find a crystal. Once you grab the crystal out of the mines, the team is then separated for a 2D challenge section to save the miners. Only Knuckles and Amy help out. Why are they the only ones helping out / the only ones you can play during this section? Because the game tells you to. One of my biggest annoyances with this game is that half of it is so inorganic for why things happen. It's like this. The story is at point A and needs to go to point C. Instead of making a sensible or intellectual point B that contextualizes and help develop the connection between narrative and gameplay, they just go straight from point A to point C and hope no one notices. Again, this is a product of rushed development. Once we come back with a crystal, we can open up these gates to progress to a new area. If you can't already guess how game progression works, I'll spell it out for you. Go into the new area, grab the crystal at the end, find the next gate in the overworld, rinse and repeat. It's not an awful or frustrating system, it's just so incredibly dull when mixed with how this game operates. Again, a big issue I have with this game is the whole point A to point C. It feels sloppy and mind-numbing. I'm sure you could find some dissonance between gameplay and narrative if you scrutinize most stories in platforming games, which is fair. It's so painfully obvious to me, however, when a game like this has so many cutscenes and narrative moments that make absolutely no sense or adds nothing to gameplay or the plot of the game. The first new area we gain access to starts with a speed section. Once that's over, we find ourselves in a research facility and are confronted with these light panel challenges. These appear throughout the game on multiple occasions, and the challenge rarely ramps up. The goal is to step on a bright blue panel, which will turn it into a white panel, allowing a non-lit panel to become light blue. In short, you step on them in particular order. The challenge comes from your lack of intelligence or patience. These aren't like the panels from the Mario games where if you touch a previously touched panel, it reverts to not being activated. It also isn't something where the puzzle restarts or punishes you if you step outside of the designated path. No, that would make these challenges somewhat a challenge. You could light up one panel and touch every other panel on the floor besides the next panel in the order, and nothing happens. The game doesn't make this mechanic enjoyable in any way. It's mindless and skill-less busywork. After that section, we're placed in a large room where platforming challenges are. Most platforming in this game isn't that hard. I'm just glad it isn't infuriating or as brain dead as the tile mechanic. The game often consists of these large platforming areas where you go to a few locations and interact with something to open a door or something like that. After this section, Sonic and Tails get separated from Knuckles and Amy because they fell down a trap door. After Knuckles and Amy do some more platforming to make it to the next section, this leads to a cutscene where we meet a character named Maya, who is in search of Sonic.
Negative for Blue Hedgehog.
But positive for Red Echidna.
Red Echidna irrelevant.
We then naturally cut to Sonic and Tails as they learn how to Hydro Dash. When a character enters one of these rings near water, they can dash across the water. These aren't half bad. They aren't as tight and restricting as the speed sections, but still give a decent sense of speed compared to the regular jog Sonic and friends usually move at. Again, it's not great, but it's probably one of the more enjoyable mechanics in this game. However, the sound of hydro dashing gets ear-grating after a while. I bet this surprises no one, but this game isn't a masterclass in audio mixing. The other issue that a lot of people made fun of on release was the incessant dialogue the characters had. Some of the lines are perfectly fine. The problem is how constantly these animals talk. During scripted sections, one or two of them will speak about the current situation, which is fine when done in moderation. The characters also just randomly talk, which can be fine, and the characters often reuse a lot of the same dialogue for doing generic actions like jumping on a bounce pad, fighting enemies, and going through dash rings. This isn't fine. The issue with all of these things is that they're all happening at the same time. Sometimes one character will say something specific to the moment, only to be interrupted by another character saying something generic, who is then interrupted by something random because why not? Some of this dialogue, though, is just painful to listen to because of how useless, uninteresting, or incoherent it is. Some of these did make me smile and even chuckle, but that was few and far between, and most of them, I was laughing for the wrong reasons. Once Sonic and Tails finish the Hydro Dash section, they go into a room and activate some things so that they can continue Hydro Dashing, which then leads to another room in which they have to activate something so they can continue Hydro Dashing. After that, they meet Maya, who tells them if they can go back in time, they can find a map to find all the MacGuffins to progress the story. To do this, Knuckles and Amy's need to activate a generator with a conveniently placed crystal nearby. Once they do that, Sonic and Tails are almost ready to do some time-traveling shenanigans, only to be stopped by Shadow. What's Shadow's reason for opposition to the heroes? It could be boiled down to he's an anti-hero / jerk, so beat the stuffing out of him. After a battle through time, Sonic and Tails find themselves in the past, approximately 1,000 years from the current story. They then screw around for a bit and eventually meet past Maya and Lyric to set certain plot points in motion, like how Lyric knew Sonic at the beginning of the game and blamed him for trapping him for 1,000 years. This section is just the regular, a couple of speed sections, panel puzzles, 3D and 2D platforming, and fighting sections. Oh yeah, fighting in this game exists. Fighting is a large chunk of this game, and I don't necessarily think that's for a good reason. I don't feel combat is particularly deep mechanically or intense. Especially in later parts of the game, some enemies feel like damage sponges as you repeatedly spam the same attacks. You have a light attack button, a special / heavy attack button, and a dodge roll using the shoulder button. These are the basics of the mechanics, and unfortunately there aren't any elaborate combos or anything like that. It's so elementary, and fighting can feel like a chore since the game's philosophy seems to be, oh, how do we make this game longer? Oh, I know, let's just put some more robots in. The other ability you have is use of your Enter Beam to grab enemies and either disarm them if they have something like shields, or spin them around and toss them at other enemies. Later in the game, whenever possible, I used the Enter Beam, picked up enemies, and threw them off a ledge to instantly kill them. Again, the fighting isn't frustrating or soul-destroying, it's just so dull. Once we steal the map and lock Lyric away for 1,000 years, we make it back to the future to continue our quest. Eggman finds Lyric and threatens Lyric to give up technological secrets. Lyric then pulls an Uno Reverse on Eggman to get him to deal with Sonic. We then open another gate where we soon find this sailor. His boat is broken, and if we can find all the missing pieces, then we can progress. After we find the pieces around the area, we can board this boat where the game becomes a twin-stick shooter. I've covered a twin-stick shooter in the past with Hotline Miami, and this section pales in comparison. The boat is floaty to control, the cannon's range is limited, and the graphical and audio feedback is incredibly flat. When you have good visual and audio feedback, it makes something feel impactful and realistic. Whenever I shoot at something in this section, it just feels like enemies have 10 shots till I explode kind of thing. It feels just like numbers and binaries being filled out, which is what all games are at the end of the day, but a good game makes you forget about that and brings you into the unique experience the game is trying to produce. After encountering Eggman and escaping him by careening off a waterfall, we then find ourselves at another speed section. After that, Amy and Tails leave the group because the game says so, leaving this section exclusively to Sonic and Knuckles. That then leads to some platforming and Sonic making an Indiana Jones reference, maybe.
Hate snakes.
It's just the routine, pull some stuff, bounce around, fight enemies, and the urge to turn off the console and go outside. This robot thing gets activated by us and we take it down by throwing enemies at it. It opens a hole to where more platforming and fighting can be had. We later find Tails and Amy as they tell us how they managed to get here without having to do much anything, which honestly sounds like I would have preferred following them rather than Sonic and Knuckles. We then finish with one more speed section and then the first real boss of the game. It's a mechanical worm designed to chew through rock and metal to mine through the earth. Naturally, knowing how it works, we throw stuff into its mouth to stun it. This allows the team to pull the worm down and smack it around. You repeat that cycle till the worm dies, and you receive a crystal. Yay team. We then walk around the hub world and slap the crystal into yet another gate to progress. Of course, the following area starts with a speed section. In my particular playthrough, Sonic got a bit cocky.
You think collapsing roads will stop me?
No, but the lack of collision detection will. They then find Cliff, who has restored an ancient biplane of sorts. They then break several health and safety regulations as they fly across the ocean. And it takes us to the second hub world, I think? I always thought that this section was just another part of the last. It all feels the same to me. I guess I wasn't really paying attention at the time to what was happening in the story. We then meet this mayor guy and avoid him. We then find a large platforming room where we open the door to the next area, which starts with the speed section. Then it's platforming, fighting, do a disappearing act, then platform and fight. You then get a crystal for all your hard work with staying awake after playing this game for almost 3.5 hours. While I was walking around the hub world, I found one of these signposts where you spend robot parts on them. Robot parts are found in chests as well as just defeating robot enemies. When you pay the fee for these signs, they build a structure that will reveal things like crowns. Crowns are hidden throughout levels and hub worlds and can be used to upgrade the team's abilities. These upgrades barely do anything to my perception, and since you have to go to specific locations to upgrade them, I find little to no use for them. This also applies to these power glyph things, which also do nothing in practice. All these collectibles and upgrades are just so worthless to the point where I have to force talking about them in this script because, quite frankly, they do so very little to contribute to the gameplay. The only upgrade that would potentially be useful is this ring capacity upgrade, which would translate to more health. However, this means little when 1. This game is painfully easy, and 2. You can't even buy the upgrades unless you have a 3DS with a copy of Shattered Crystals. Shattered Crystals was essentially the portable version of this game, however, the story and gameplay are vastly different. Regardless, making the only upgrade in this game that's worth something locked behind a paywall where you have to have another system and game is so unbelievably confounding. Oh yeah, Sonic and team find Lyric and Eggman and lead them away from this village area into a speed section. I have to mention this because of how it perplexes me. Tails starts off this section by saying this.
Lyric is blinded by rage. He can't see the importance of the balance between technology and the environment.
I don't know if this is just a groan-worthy example of poor writing by Tails speaking about something that is so painful to listen to, or perhaps that this was intentional to show Tails' character of always stating his observations in a scientific way, even if everyone around him already knows what he has to say already. It's probably the first, but I'm trying to keep it positive here. Anywho, this speed section consists of regular running and some hydro dashing. The narrative point of this section is to run away from Lyric and Eggman. Though, in this section, the characters throw the crystals at one another. Like most things in this game, there isn't a good or organic method of storytelling as to why the characters throw the crystal around. They always seem to be ahead of Lyric and Eggman, so tossing the crystal appears unnecessary. Again, I'm nitpicking, but with a game this mundane, that's all I can really pick from when making a video like this. After that riveting chase, we do some fighting and then have this interaction.
Guess you didn't find a way to go back in time and fix my problem. No wonder. Time travel's impossible.
I don't think you're supposed to touch that stuff. Maybe we should have looked harder for his ancestor.
Apparently, when we were back in time, we could have helped his ancestor or something. This honestly took me by surprise, as I feel a concept like doing something in the past to change the present/future isn't half bad. Though seeing how I just figured out about this now, and I already want this game to end, it's probably another idea that this Rush game prohibits me from caring about. Beyond that area, we get onto this slow boat ride, which gets frequently interrupted by robots. After that, it's the usual platform fight routine. After we obtain the crystal, we fight off against Metal Sonic. To take him down, all you have to do is attack these ball thingies, and they should fly back at him. I think he should take fewer hits than he did to come down, but I guess this fight was alright. Might as well talk about speed sections as a whole right now. Speed sections are notorious in this game for chugging the frame rate. During some sections, it just feels like autopilot is on, while in others, it feels like there are too many obstacles to dodge, especially when the movement from side to side is floaty. All of the obstacles are clearly designed to be contained within 3 rows, but instead of snapping in between each row like you could in many of the 3D Boost Formula games, you drift between the rows, which leads to me losing more rings than I think is fair. That's the biggest reason why I prefer hydro dashing to these speed sections. The controls are more or less the same, it's just the obstacles feel better tailored to the controls with the hydro dashing sections in my opinion. Also, Sonic's jump animation in these sections looks incredibly odd to me. The next level is the same as always, with the uniqueness coming from dealing with this Guardian and being restricted to Sonic and Amy because, say it with me, the game tells you so. After the usual, we grab the crystal and then are forced into this rail shooter section. As with the twin stick shooter before it, this is worse in comparison to almost every other rail shooter I've played. Think of every aspect and facet of a rail shooter, and just imagine those mechanics as dull or straight up bad. It ends with a boss fight of sorts against some guardians, and that's all that's there. The level after that is another unremarkable trip through mediocrity. This area has parts where Sonic and Knuckles are together, while Tails and Amy can be played later on. The game doesn't seem to care anymore because there's no cutscene or even a paper-thin narrative excuse as to why they're separate. They jump off of the speech section, then a loading screen, and then poof, you're limited to Sonic and Knuckles. Also, Lyric and Eggman had a falling out, so now they're at each other's throats. Eggman will appear sporadically throughout the level and shoot at you and whatnot. That's about all I can say for this section. Once you grab the crystal, you fight Eggman in his mech. He'll shoot dud missiles that you can enter beam back at him to stun him and eventually beat down on him. The boss is okay, not offensive, but not fun either. I don't care. You don't care. Nobody cares. Why am I still writing this video? Sorry. The team then go to this structure in the hub world and place the crystal in as normal. The structure magically teleports Knuckles and Amy away, leaving Sonic and Tails behind because the game tells you so. Would you be surprised if I told you this level wasn't the worst? Again, it still has that feeling of repetition, though the puzzles and challenges at play are not totally mind-numbing, so I don't mind this level in terms of gameplay. The puzzles are these light beam puzzles which, while simple, can at least classify as a puzzle. There are also a lot of bottomless pits and spikes when trying to platform, which, while that isn't particularly interesting, it does serve to make me pay attention to what I'm doing. I also like floating city/ruin locations in games, so seeing that aesthetic matched, I was happy in that regard. Also, Knuckles tries to be vulnerable and asks for physical affection from Amy, which she places a boundary against that. I'm not going to show the scene I'm talking about because it's probably more confusing that way. Though, narratively, this is one of the most frustrating levels per se for me. First off, we just have incorrect dialogue in terms of what the game shows.
There they are. It looks like they're landing up ahead.
No, Amy, as you can see, they have clearly already landed, and as we see later from where the plane is, they have been here for quite some time. The biggest frustration, however, is with this important scene. Lyric surrounds Sonic with his robot army and demands that the team give him the crystals if they want Sonic to survive. They comply, which then leads to the scene from the very beginning of the game. Sonic gets shot, and the team thinks he's done for. But then, as they approach the body, it turns out Sonic is completely fine. What? So all the lasers and boulders that make contact with him barely left a scratch? If that's the case, then we can assume Sonic's health in the narrative is similar to how it operates in the gameplay, with lasers only taking off a few rings/health points. Knowing this, why was the team worried about him and decided to give Lyric the crystal? If this scene was supposed to mean anything, wouldn't it have been better if he was gravely injured or injured in any measure at all? This could mean the team would have to do something to get Sonic up and running before confronting Lyric. I can't believe I'm saying this, but at least 06 had the decency for Sonic's death to mean something. The crew in that game had to get the Chaos Emeralds to revive him. Even if the whole part of Sonic dying in that game is dumb and kinda pointless, at least it somewhat makes sense to the rest of the continuity the game had up until that point. I seriously wonder if this cutscene was supposed to lead to more narrative moments if this game hadn't been rushed, like the team needing to save Sonic in some measure. I don't know, maybe it's okay that Sonic can walk that off like it was nothing. It still bothers me and doesn't sit right with me. Anywho, after that scene, I spent more time critiquing than the actual scene itself. The heroes escape the collapsing sky ruins because they're collapsing now, I guess, and escape in the biplane. Also, there are 2 plane models loaded at this point. Nice oversight. In our magical biplane, we go to this dreary location. Through here, it's the final level of the game, and unfortunately for me, it's one of the worst. The amount of enemies that you have to fight throughout this entire level is just painful. The actual level would probably be half of the time it takes if you didn't have to deal with all the enemies. I now know why I enjoyed the previous level. Because the first 2/3 of it had no enemies. You didn't have to mindlessly hit robots to get moving on with the stage. Since the level allowed you to go as fast as you can safely platform, it allowed for much more enjoyment, even if the platforming wasn't particularly inspiring. When there are so many enemies with high amounts of damage intake, I don't feel like I'm doing anything useful. I feel like I'm just waiting for the game to let me continue on with my life. I can't kill the enemies faster or pull off insane combos to get a rank that actually means anything to me. So in the end, it feels almost as if there's no difference from how I'm playing compared to a 4-year-old. Good game design allows people at varying skill levels to play a game and still have a good time. A young child can play a game like New Super Mario Bros. And get to the end with some time and effort, while someone at my skill level of 2D platformers could probably finish the game much quicker and with much more finesse. Both people in this equation can still enjoy the game because it has a high skill ceiling while still being accessible to start. Making a game where beating up enemies takes more or less the same amount of time, no matter how you approach it, has a skill ceiling of approximately 3 centimeters. After playing through that slog of a level and getting soft lock in this elevator sequence, we finally confront Lyric. He's using the crystals to power his robot army to destroy everything and whatnot. You just have to smack him enough until he falls over to put a stop to him. You can then grab his tail with the Enter Beam, which deactivates a barrier leading to crystals. Not sure why pulling on his tail deactivates these force fields, but this game has had worse logic. To get to these crystals, you have to switch to a character and use their specific abilities to platform across to make it to the crystal. I like the idea of using the team's unique ability in this final battle. However, it's still not great since you have to smack Lyric around before he gets stunned so that you can platform over to the crystals. After repeating the process of stunning him and grabbing crystals, he eventually goes down. The scene then sees Lyric on the ground as the team approaches him. Lyric then presses his magical button to activate the team's Enter Beam things back into the formation he used before to tie them up at the beginning of the game. Before Lyric can do anything, he gets hit by a missile sent from good old Baldy McNosehair himself. Eggman then falls over and we defeat Lyric with the power of teamwork, and Shadow then shows up from when we smacked him through the portal forward in time, and he kind of congratulates us for defeating Lyric and then leaves. Well, that certainly was an ending. There are technically more cutscenes and an end credit scene, but it's all superfluous. Now, what do I think of the game? I think to talk about this game's quality and what I actually feel towards this game, I think it would be most effective if I went off script for this bit, so sorry if things are a bit disjointed. This game is just okay. In all honesty, a lot of the criticisms I have of the game are blown out of proportion a bit, in the sense that when you're playing the game, it really isn't that bad. When you play it, again, there's just no real reason to continue playing it. It's not frustrating and it's not really enjoyable or anything like that. There's no emotional connection to this game for me, and honestly, that's one of the worst things a video game can do. If there's no emotional response, then there's no way any kind of connection can be built. Now sure, if a game is overly frustrating and you're just fuming at how bad the game design is, then yeah, that's totally unpleasant to play a game like that. But at least you'll remember a game like that. Because a game like Sonic Boom, I honestly forgot 75% of what went on in that game and only remembered things when I was looking at footage in review. Speaking of things I forgot, I was just looking at my notes and totally forgot that there's this Aya mechanic where if you press something on the gamepad, then it changes the screen so that you can see things like secrets, breakable walls, and whatnot. And quite frankly, I never used it outside of when the game required it or asked me to use it. So again, that just accentuates the whole theme of this game being forgettable. And I think that's probably why my criticisms were scathing at some points, because quite simply, when I looked at what I had been playing, I just got frustrated that I wasted all my time on that. I just think it's so unfortunate that this game came out the way it did, because the thing that I draw a comparison to is that this is kind of like a license game. If a kid plays it and has interest in the character or series, they can probably enjoy something like this. But for somebody like me, who has had a lot of experience playing a lot of beautiful games, and games that evoke feelings and joy and frustration and all those emotions, playing a game like this, it's just so draining to me. I felt exhausted after playing this game because during every single play session, I had to consciously put effort in to make myself continue playing the game. Because without that, I would have given up. I wouldn't have cared to play this game. And honestly, if a video game is making you do that, making it feel like a chore to get through, even if it is an easy chore, why are you playing the game? And I think that's one of the most disappointing things, because even with some Sonic games which are contested, let's say, in their quality. Let's take the adventure games. Despite what some people would like you to believe, the adventure games aren't perfect. But what I will agree with them is, they can be incredibly fun simply because of how charming they are and how interesting compared to what other games were offering at the time, and in many ways, there's still very unique experiences that can only be experienced in those games. And I've played the games multiple times, and I really enjoy them, even if I can see that they do have quite a few different flaws. Heck, I even played a game like Sonic 3D Blast on the Sega Saturn, and that's probably one of the most mixed / black sheep games of the entire series. And yet, I was able to really enjoy myself simply because of the novelty of playing that game on the Sega Saturn, and really getting a feel of what Sega was doing in 1996. But Sonic Boom doesn't do that. It's just so draining to play for me because, as I have criticized in the video, it's just mind-numbing to play. And honestly, that's one of the worst things a video game can do. And I think that is just my thoughts towards the game. It's honestly fine in the sense that it's not offensive or repulsive, but there's no reason to play it. And if there's no reason to play it, then why would you ever play it? And that's all I can say about the game. I've probably repeated myself with some of the points, but I just really want to get across that there's no reason to care about this game, at least from my perspective. Also, I completely forgot to mention this, but the music in this game is fairly good. Not all that recognizable outside of the main theme, but it's still fairly good, especially in terms of it being the background to a game. Though when the game's as poor as it is, the music doesn't really help all that much. Is it one of the worst Sonic games? In terms of some aspects, yes, but in others, no. It's just another meh 3D/2D platforming game that can honestly be forgotten to the sands of time, and I'd be okay with it. With Sonic Frontiers on the horizon, I still have some hope the Sonic series will regain some of the charm like I was talking about with some previous games, though unfortunately from the trailers we've seen at the point of editing this video, and Sega refusing to delay the game despite a large part of the fandom pleading them to do so, my hope isn't burning nearly as bright, though I still try my best to maintain hope. Let's just believe the best about Frontiers and judge the game on what we receive. Thank you for watching this video. This is perhaps how I'd like to structure longer reviews of games, so as always, comment if you have any suggestions to make this video type or channel in general something that's more palatable and enjoyable for everyone in the equation. Regardless, I'm Jag, and I hope you have a lovely morning, evening, or afternoon. Take care.